Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U. And today we're going to answer the question, what it takes to sell your script. So this is a key question to your success. This isn't a small thing. I've spent lots and lots of time around people who have written 5 to 10 screenplays and still never figured this out. And because of that, they haven't sold any scripts yet. So we need to make sure that you and I and everyone else in this industry knows what they're doing. So here's what we'll do today. We'll start with what causes a script to sell, because it's different than just, oh, they like the story, or because I wrote it, or something like that. There are very specific things that producers, agents, managers are looking for. And if you know them, you are going to be much more successful when you pitch. Then, who's your target market? Uh, you know, I'll tell you the biggest mistake that I've seen. There's a lot of people who think they've never worked in this industry, they've never done anything, they've never had a movie made, and they think their primary market is the studio. And then they go there and find out that the studio won't look at their projects. And it's not that the studio won't ever see their projects. It's just that the studio already has an entire industry feeding them. So the studio is open to producers, and that is your target market. You go to the producers who then take it to the studio. Then it's about, how do you get that script in the door? Big mystery. I'm going to give you a solution today so that you'll know and you'll be able to make really good decisions. And then finally, in the end, a class called Getting Your Script to Power Players. Power players are those producers, agents, managers in the industry that can get it into studios. This program is the most up-to-date program there is on how to get your scripts in the door. Once you've gone through this program, you will know exactly what you're doing. So let's just jump into today's. Our philosophy. Writing a script is a creative act. I think everybody can agree with that. So, but selling a script is a business act that requires some creativity, right? Now, if you understand the difference, it's like I've had a lot of people come to me and say, well, I wrote it. I think it's great. Is there anything I need to change on it? That's the creative part. The selling part is, this is all about the business. It's all about, what do the business people in this industry need? What do the studios need? What do the streamers need? All of that kind of thing. And how can you hand them that and that only? So you'll see what I'm talking about when we get into this. So all of your success at this shows up in your belief in yourself. Critically important. You need to believe in yourself. Your willingness to make changes. Let's just pause for a second. I want to make sure this one's really clear. Everybody out there who tells you not to make changes to your script is either already inside and has a huge following and massive amounts of success, and they can make those decisions, or the person doesn't know what they're talking about. Listen, you have no idea how many times I've had somebody get what looked like a deal with the producer, and the producer comes back and says, hey, in order to get this produced, I need these 3 things to be changed inside the script. The writer will say no, and the producer will be out of there so fast, because they don't want to work with a writer who doesn't understand that there are also business needs. That's really important. As long as, and here I'll give you the big safety tip. This is important. If you're willing to make the changes, your project moves forward. But here's the big safety tip: you stay on the project. If they have optioned the script or purchased the screenplay and you refuse to make changes, what they'll do is they'll just fire you. They'll get another writer. And here is the bad thing. It's not the producer that's going to destroy your script. It's the other writer. And they have to, because in order for them to get a credit, they need to make at least 33% change in that script and maybe 50% change in that script. So we had this happen. It was the most tragic event I ever saw. I had a lady who had written this incredible script. I absolutely loved it. I made a couple of calls for her. She got it in some places. She ended up with a different producer who said yes to it. The producer signed on. They're moving forward. Everything's good. The producer comes back to her. It looks like they've got actors involved, all that kind of thing. Things are happening. And our writer told her that she wouldn't change a word. The producer came back to her twice and said, here, all we need are these 6 things changed, and we've got a deal. My writer refused. I didn't hear about any of this. She didn't tell me this until after it was done. My writer refused, and she was fired on the spot. They brought in another writer who completely destroyed that script. Our writer was in her agreement. She had added one sentence in her agreement that said she would be notified at every draft of the script, any changes that had been made. And so she kept getting these notifications about changes, and they were awful. The other writer was just trying to change enough stuff so they got credit. We were lucky in that situation. I sat down with the writer. She called me up crying on the phone for the 3rd time. I sat down with her and I said, okay, here's what you've got to do. I can only think of one way to make this work. You know that script is no longer anything close to as good as it was. You take the list of changes that the producer originally wanted, rewrite the script right now with those changes, fully honoring them, and then go back to this producer and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know I have made all the changes that you asked for. Would you be willing to take a look at this version? So she did, got it into the producer. The producer read them and went, wow, great. I love the script the way it is. We're going to move forward. And she fired the other writer. So you don't want to go through that. Just decide up front, if they have legitimate changes, you want to stay on the project. You want to interact with the producer about those changes. You want to make the script even better because of those changes. And you want to create the conditions for a sale. You want to make it as easy as possible for this movie, first for them to option it or buy it from you, and second, for them to make the deal with the studio or the streamer. That doesn't mean you're giving in or any of that kind of thing. When it comes to, hey, if I got to change some words on page 32, the answer is yes. Why would I say for 2 sentences, I'm going to give up my chance to have control of my own project? I just want you to be thinking of it that way so that you're successful. We do everything we can to have our writers be successful, including if somebody actually has gone through a major class with us, I'm willing to coach them on this process. But it's so important. Let's go on. To sell a script, you need a script that can sell. And we define this as you've got some kind of major hook. Please keep this in mind. I have people tell me my script can sell, and I'll say, okay, excellent, good for you. By the way, why do you think that? And they'll say, because I spent 3 months writing it or something else. They'll tell me of the creative part. The reason the script can sell is because of the business part. So the first thing is this major hook. Then it's about making sure that you have a high concept that when they ask you to pitch it in a single sentence, whatever sentence you say, lights them up. And that makes a big difference. Let me give you a definition of a high concept. A, it's unique in a significant way. You've got some kind of major hook there that you're presenting, right? It's this. You need a major hook that you're presenting. B, it can be pitched in one sentence. And then C, they instantly get the movie. Now, if you think that can't happen, then that usually means this is a fairly new concept to you, which is okay. We learn these things as we go. The more time you spend marketing scripts, the more it's going to become completely natural to you. But I've gone through the process of helping 500 writers make their first deal. I've been there in some cases. I've been there when they pitched. We've done 28 events where our writers pitched to producers, and it was only our writers in the room. And I knew the producers, so I knew what happened. And I went and talked to some of those producers afterwards to find out what worked, what didn't work. So this stuff, we have helped people sculpt their concepts, their pitch, the whole thing, and then set and watched how it went across with producers, what caused them to say yes, all of that. The more you can understand and work with this, the more successful you're going to be as a writer. So, the other thing you need is an engaging title. And this is pretty important. You need, let me back up. Here, I'll just back up. There we are. You need an engaging title. This means that the title goes together with the concept incredibly well. Essentially, the title points to the concept. The one I can give you that is just the most obvious ever is the movie Titanic. And as soon as you say the word Titanic, the title, people see it. They see the whole story. They know exactly what's about to happen, right? It basically, the title gives the concept in that particular situation. So if you can have that, where the moment you say it, they just get it, you're in better shape than 99% of the writers out there. The second version is where you say the title and they're intrigued. And then when you say the concept, the high concept, the two go together really well. Here's what you don't want. You don't want a title that is confusing or that they have to try to figure out, or that is something that we don't find out what it means until page 72. If you have any of those kinds of titles, I would start brainstorming so that you can get one that the moment they hear it, they're intrigued. And the moment they hear the concept, those two to go together incredibly well. Do that, and you are another step closer to selling, because the title is how everybody in this industry talks about your script. It's how the media presents your movie, right? It's in the newspapers, it's in social media, it's everywhere. It's the most important marketing words in your entire project. It is more important. Let me say it this way. I asked 10 producers at one point, 10 right in a row. We were doing interviews with 10 producers. I asked them, how important is the title in your decision to option the script? The lowest number I got was 30%. The highest number I got was 50%. But let's just take the 30%. What that means is, again, if you've got a great title and you've got a great high concept, all that has to happen is the writing is good. You might have the best writing in the world, but if you have a title they can't figure out, 90% chance they're going to say no. So just know that. This is worth re-brainstorming. Even if you say, I love my title. It came to me when I was writing my first draft, which is usually where this happens. it's like, great, good for you. Now we need to come up with a title that can sell. That any producer, any studio, any streamer, anyone who is only thinking from a box office success perspective says that's the perfect title. And again, if you do that, the people who are trying to buy, the ones who want to make this decision as to whether or not your project sells to them, are going to look at your title and go, that makes total sense. Love it. And by the way, this writer really knows what they're doing. Now, again, if along the way I'm saying anything that doesn't agree with your current philosophy, uh, just look at your philosophy and ask yourself, have you already sold scripts? If you have, keep your philosophy. If you haven't, I highly recommend adopting this philosophy. It comes from all those deals we made. It comes from all those producers I've interviewed, which I've interviewed about 600 producers plus or minus. I have talked with at least 150 of them in front of audiences about titles because it's so important. So, and our model is exactly what they're saying their model is. So that helps you succeed. Second thing you need is you need great roles for lead characters. And by the way, I am completely on your side. I really am. I want you to succeed. That's why we did all this. When I first came here, I had a script that had an incredible title, and it had a high concept. I had fluked on it, and it got us in the door of 24 major production companies. And afterwards, I thought, wow, that was easy. And then we went back with one where I just come up with a title along the way, and didn't have a high concept. And we got into one door, and that's because that was the guy who had optioned the first script. And it was like, wow, it was just a nightmare trying to get into those doors when we didn't make decisions that fit the business side of the journey. So back to this, great roles for lead characters. This is a decision that is about actors, and it's about actors signing on. So I've had a lot of times where people will say, I have a great role. Yeah, I absolutely love my protagonist. And then, well, it, I'll say, okay, good. Tell them to me in two sentences so that we can translate this to a producer. And first, most of them won't be able to do it. But second, when they do, a lot of times at the end of that, it just sounds like a pretty cliche character. If you're trying to go for major actors, I've interviewed a bunch of actors. I've actually interviewed Denzel Washington, and a bunch of others, but I went and talked to their producers, and we talked to George Clooney's producer. We talked to Pierce Brosnan's producer and 23 others, uh, asking them specifically what did they need to see in order to even get the script to their actor. And this is what they were looking for, an incredible role that the moment that you even pitch it, people go, oh my God, I've got to see that character. You know, it's not a thing of, oh, okay, all right, yeah, that sounds like a good character. It's like, oh, that's astounding, right? It's like you need some kind of role that is so interesting, so special, so unique that everybody in this industry wants to be part of it. Then here's the other thing. The other way you get in the door is intellectual property. And this means you have the rights to a book, comic, life story that is highly marketable. And highly marketable means really one of two things. It means it either has an incredible concept and the book is now coming out kind of thing, or it means the book already has had huge success. You know, we had one writer, uh, came to me and she said, I read this book. I absolutely love it. And I would like to do something with it. I'd like to write a script based on it. What do I do? Now, here's the first piece of advice. Don't ever adapt an IP that you don't have an option on the rights in writing. Let me back up, excuse me. In writing, incredibly important. So I ask her, do you have the rights in writing? And she goes, no. And I said, okay, then let's evaluate right now. What makes you think it's easy to sell? And she started telling me the story. And there was a lot of information there. She hadn't thought about how to pitch it yet, which was, I was just jumping the gun. But she ended it by saying, and it just got on the New York Times bestseller list today. And I was like, okay, go back to that author, give them an option agreement, get the rights in writing so that you two can work together and you can move forward. Do that now, right now. Don't wait. Call her right this moment. Because tomorrow everybody's going to see it on the New York Times bestseller list, and everybody and their dog's going to go after her. So she did. She got the rights. She got them that signed everything else. She took that in, and her pitch began this way. I have a current New York Times bestseller that is about, and then she would say one sentence. We got it down to a single high concept sentence. She got that into 35 producers. One of them came back to her a day later and they made a deal. So that's intellectual property if you're a New York Times bestseller. Let me tell you the other side. There's a couple of million books listed on Amazon, of which less than 1% of them qualify inside this industry. So it takes you back to this right here. Does it have an engaging title and a great role for a lead character? And can you pitch it in a high concept? If you have that, then it's worth moving forward. So just keep that in mind. And then again, don't ever adapt anything that you don't have the rights to. The only exception to that is if you're putting a new spin on something that's in public domain. And again, make sure it's a new spin because everybody has already tried the other spins. So, okay. Now, you also need then a well-written pitch. And I'm going to show you something later on that will give you at least have you see what one looks like. But let's just go through some keys. First thing, it's not a book report. This is what most people do the first time they pitch. And if you've pitched, at 2 or 3 different events, or if you've pitched to producers multiple times and realized at some point along the way, you can't just give a book report. They're not interested in hearing the whole story. That doesn't matter to them. When the producer is listening to you, they are listening through their business hat. They are, all they're thinking is, can I sell this? So that's incredibly important. So you want to make sure that this is what a well-delivered written pitch does. You want to make sure that it delivers the high concept powerfully. If you are doing, if you are pitching live, like let's say you're on one of those Zoom meetings, you're face-to-face with a producer, you have 5 minutes. Here's my advice. Tell them up front the genre, title, high concept immediately before you start telling anything else. Do that, and you're likely in business at that moment. If you don't do that, I'll tell you what happens when you're pitching, just because, again, we've been through this. If I don't tell them the genre, they're actually trying to figure it out while I'm talking. And I know to you, it's absolutely, of course, this is this genre. But I have I said at one event, and this one guy pitched his stuff, and the producer started laughing in the middle of it. And the writer got offended and he said, "It's not a comedy, it's a drama." And the producer was like, "Well, you should have told me that. I would have listened to it differently." Keep that in mind. So, what I do is we tell them the genre, title, high concept. We have now said the three key pieces of information that they need. I may cover this later on, but I just wanted to make it sure it's clear to you right now. We've covered the three key pieces of information they need to make a decision. Then when you tell them the story, as long as it matches those, you're in business. Uh, but make sure you tell them the high concept as soon as possible. We had one pitch event where I told this lady, I said, your story is a good story, but it's too long. Please tell them the high concept first. And she goes, "No, I'm saving that for the end. That's the punchline." So I stood behind her when she pitched. The producer is over there, and I swear to God, he's falling asleep as she's talking. And she gets to the end and she says, "And the high concept is," which perked him up. And then she said it, and he goes, "Oh." He says, "Okay, tell me the story again." Now, it should be pretty clear what just happened, but I interviewed him afterwards. And I said, "So you remember that situation?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Wow, she completely put me to sleep with her story." And he said, I was a little tired, but it was bad. And then she told me the high concept, and I went, "I can sell that." So then I went back through and listened to the story again, and I optioned it based on the high concept. So that's important. This is what sells to audiences. Incredibly important. Make sure that's what you tell them up front. One other safety tip on this. We were at a pitch fest before the pandemic. And I told all my writers, I said, whatever pitch you have, I don't care. Tell them genre, title, high concept, pause for the count of 10. And then ask them if they'd like to hear the story. Uh, we had our 30 people got more script requests than the other 270 combined in the room. I'm serious, because our people didn't end up telling their stories. They just said genre, title, high concept. The producer said yes. Then they said, "Do you mind if I tell you another? Genre, title, high concept." The producer said yes. And it went like that. We had one guy who got, I think it was like 67 script requests because he'd done such a good job on those. So just keep that in mind. Uh, you pitch only the lead characters. Never pitch more than a maximum of 3 characters. If you say 4 names during even a 5-minute pitch, they're going to get confused. And what they'll get confused with is they'll remember the names, but they'll be like, wait a minute. So Janine, was she the one that did this early in the story? And it's like, no, it wasn't Janine. It was, Wendy. And it's, so just maximum 3, lead characters only. Make sure that you have something really interesting to say about them. And again, we see the movie, but through the most interesting parts. Do that, and you're in good shape. Now, target. Your target market is producers. So only pitch producers who fit your genre and budget range. I have a friend who is one of the biggest horror producers there is. And one day I had lunch with him and he says, "I have to ask you a question." And I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" He says, "You know hundreds of writers." And I said, "Yeah, I know thousands of writers." And he goes, "Okay." He says, "Tell me, why would they send me, a horror producer, a rom-com?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think they were thinking when they made that decision." And he says, I've never done anything besides horror, never. But he says, once a month, somebody sends me a rom-com. And it's pretty strange. Anyway, so just the first way you qualify producers is, do they do my genre? Have they already made a movie or a TV series in my genre? And second, are they in my budget range? And do I have something that fits in a range that works for them? If they are high budget producers, studio producers, and you're bringing in a 1 to 3 million project, that's not going to work for them. On the other side, if you're talking to 1 to 3 million producers and you bring in a $50 million project, that it's an automatic no. So this is just a simple thing. You go to IMDb. IMDb Pro is where I go. You pay the $20 for the monthly subscription on IMDb Pro, and you go through and you look for producers who are in your genre. Like if you have a comedy, you search comedy under $5 million, right? There's a whole search thing there, and you can choose exactly the kind of producer you want to find. And it'll only give you those producers. And now you have producers you can either call or send emails to or whatever that all fit your project, right? This gives you access to buyers. And that is what you need. So, and then the other thing to know, and this is really important, we're only looking for the open doors, right? This is, I have people, and let me just put this other one up. Don't worry about the closed doors. I've had people who said, I sent out a bunch of query letters and I got legal notices saying that I couldn't send them to them. And I said, so you were sending to the studios and streamers? And they'll go, yes. And it's like, okay, well, right now that's a closed door to you. There's going to be a time in your future when that becomes an open door. But the question is, where are the open doors for you right now? Right? We had one lady who has gotten to the point where she's now making movies in the 15 to 30 million range. But in the beginning, almost everybody she went to were closed doors. And I interviewed her when she made this last deal. And she said, well, she goes, I remembered you said, don't go to closed doors or don't worry about the closed doors. So she said, I tried a whole bunch of them, found out that they were closed. So I dropped down a level. I was going to big producers who work with studios. I dropped down to the 15 to 30 million range. And at that time, I couldn't get in those doors. So I dropped down again, and I ended up going to some of the smallest producers out there who had all made at least one $1 million movie. And one of them said yes. And when you find an open door, this is my advice, you step through them. So she said, I did that. I said, okay, great. I know you don't have the money for this, but if it makes more than this amount of money than I get paid, and they made one of those kinds of deals, she didn't see a cent on it. And there are people who would say, wow, she shouldn't have done that. But let me tell you what happened. Out of that one, she ended up getting some other doors opened. They were in the $5 million range, and she got a $5 million movie. And on that one, she got paid up front. She actually got paid on or before the first day of production. So when it went into production, she got a check. And she said, and she made a little money after that because it got picked up by one of the streamers. That then got her to the 15 to $30 million level. And that's where she is at the present moment. And she says she's looking forward to going to the 50 to $100 million level. So that's what happened because she stopped worrying about the closed doors. She found the open doors and she stepped through them. Okay. So now, then it's about getting your script in the door, right? And this is important. We spend a lot of time talking about how to do this, but let me just give you some basics. First, the problem. Most people either think it is easy and then they give up at the first rejection. And I'll talk about that in a second. Or they think it's impossible and they don't even try. So 90 to 95% of writers that I have had tell me that they couldn't make something happen, it was because of this. They just gave up. They gave up early. I'd say, okay, so you pitched your script, right? And they would go, yes. And I'd say, okay, and what happened? And they'd say, I got rejected. So first they bought into this bullshit right here. There isn't rejection in this industry on this. Not at this level, not this way. There's no rejection. Production companies, I ran a production company. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of producers. When I ask them about why they turn down scripts, they never say, because I don't like the look of the writer. They never say something personally about the writer unless the writer was offensive, which hardly happens. It's always because of something inside their production company. It didn't fit our mandate. That doesn't mean anything. You just go find companies that have a mandate that fit your project, right? Or they were looking for something different in some other way, different for an actor, different for certain funding, or for a business source, or they were going, your project is designed for TV, and they were looking for features, whatever. Or it conflicted with another project they already have, which happens often. If you're ever pitching and you say just your high concept, and the producer says, I have to stop you right there. We have a project that is very similar to that, right? I've seen some people who considered that rejection. I can tell you from being on the other end, from having first worked in production companies and taken pitches, and from being a producer myself, I can tell you when they say that, it's because they have a concept that if you continue talking, they're afraid you'll sue them just because you told them your concept. And they can't tell you theirs because they've already got it in some kind of stream of activity that is leading to production. So if they ever do that, that doesn't mean anything got rejected. That means, wow, you're in the ballpark. You're somebody, you have a project that is so close that a producer can't hear it. And your job, don't go saying to yourself, oh my God, but a producer already has this project and they're going to make it. Because 9 times out of 10, statistically, exactly 9 times out of 10, that producer won't be able to get the movie made. It's going to be the same for your producer. Any producer you work with, they have about a 10% chance. If they make the best decisions they can, they have about a 10% chance of getting that movie made. And so that's why you want to make sure this is absolutely amazing. But back to that. Our first real deal came. I pitched it to one producer and he said, I'm sorry, I can't listen to anything more. Your project's too close to something I'm working on. And I was like, okay, I have one other. Would you like to hear that? And he was like, absolutely, as long as it's not close to that. And I said, yes. So I pitched the other thing and he was like, okay, well, thank you for pitching, blah, blah, blah. I went to the next producer and I said, wow, and I didn't know what I was doing at that time. This was early on. I went to the next producer and I said, uh, I'm about to pitch you something, but I want you to know I had a producer just tell me yesterday that they're making something similar. And he goes, who's the producer? And I told him the name. And he said, okay, all right, pitch it to me. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, pitch it to me. I pitched it to him and he goes, I love it. Get me the script. When can you get me the script? And I said, as soon as I get back home. And he goes, okay. He says, get it over to me as fast as possible. He says, I want to see it by tomorrow morning. And I said, okay. I got it to him the next day and he calls me back about an hour later and he said, yeah, we're moving forward with this. They got me a deal almost immediately, an option I signed it, and they moved forward. Uh, it actually became kind of it was like, wow, that helped me. But he knew he could get it made where the other producer was having problems getting it made. So just know up front, uh, you know, even if they have something similar, even if they do something that looks like rejection, that doesn't mean anything. I'll tell you the other part uh, on this rejection thing. When my wife and I first started pitching, she was really good at pitching. And she's pitching along the way. And I made some phone calls and got what I thought was rejection. The producer said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't even listen to that idea." And I was like, wow, that's really weird. I just didn't understand what was saying. He was basically saying the same thing that I was just talking about. Uh, and so I stopped. My wife continued pitching, and within 3 days, she got it into 20 some odd production companies. She was very fast. She made phone calls. She called nonstop, and she had no fear. She got it into 20 some odd production companies, and that was the first one that we thought we had a deal on. We didn't. We ended up on a deal on our third. But I, at the end of that, was like, okay, so now we have a list of production companies who turned us down that we don't call again. And she was like, are you serious? She goes, I'm just starting to build a relationship with them. And every one of those companies that I thought had rejected us, that I thought we shouldn't call again, every single one of them over a 5-year period made some kind of deal with us. And some of them were options. Some of them were, they wanted us to work with them on another project. Some of them were just them reaching out and saying, hey, do you have something like this? You know, and maybe I misspoke. They did, I think we had 5 scripts option during that period of time, but they wanted to work with us. We continued to go back with them with project after project after project because we saw and understood what they needed. So that's important. Let's go to the next thing. So your solution. Know, absolutely know that it's possible and it's going to take consistent work. And this is important. We need to back up to what I was saying. Some people quit because they think it's easy and they quit at their first rejection. Some people think it's impossible and don't even try. That neither one of those is true. It's absolutely possible, and it just takes consistent work. It means just like writing pages every day. If you're writing a script, you keep writing every day. This is the same thing. When you get to marketing, you keep marketing until you've gotten it either to enough people that could say yes to it, or everybody who is possible has turned you down. Knowing that, you just built a relationship with them. So it'll make a difference for you anyway. And you can get to producers through emails, social networks, phone calls, or other methods as long as you have what I call compelling bait, right? Which was what we were talking about. It's you've got a great title, you've got it absolutely fits the genre, and you've got a high concept. And then strong roles for actors. That's your compelling bait. Okay. So here's the bait. Let's look at it. Audience bait, an intriguing concept that hooks them. Most of the time, the audience has seen a 30-second spot on Instagram or someplace else, or they've just heard the pitch, the high concept, or they've watched a trailer, right? So if you have an intriguing concept, it plays in all 3 of those. A transformational journey they want to go on. This plays in the movie trailer. You'll have a 2-minute movie trailer, and in that 2 minutes, most of the time, what they'll have is the transformational journey. We see the character where they started, then we see them hit into the first act. Now they're locked into this journey. They somehow have to go on it, but they've got all kinds of problems. We see those obstacles that come up and them make change. And ultimately, we get to the end, and they don't tell us the ending of the transformational journey in the trailer. but they give us enough of a hook so we want to come watch that movie, right? And the reason why people watch that movie is because they want to go on that journey, right? They want to have the internal experience of what they saw in the trailer. And that's how they're making their decisions a lot of times. Actor bait. This means you have a known for role. And this is important when you're talking with actors, they're considering their career, right? And in their career, uh, they only have a few roles that are known for roles. If you talk with Samuel L. Jackson and ask him the story of how he signed on to Pulp Fiction, it was because he knew that would be a known for role. And if you go look him up on IMDb, what you'll see is he's done like 140 some odd movies, and one of the three known for roles is Pulp Fiction. And let's pause. I just want you to know the reason he signed on to Pulp Fiction was because of one thing that the writer wrote. It was Quentin Tarantino, and it was that speech where he does the whole Bible verse thing and spins and shoots the guy. He loved that, caused him to sign on. He knew it would be a known for role. So uh, it's also actor bait because you've got a character that is special, unique, but it's also a universal character. It's a character people will relate to in some way. This could be a good guy or a bad guy, but there's something special about them. They do something that we haven't seen before, and they're unique in some way. Have that, you've got a better chance. And then finally, from their character introduction on, the actor wants to be this person. I've had so many actors, I'll interview them in front of audiences, and I'll say, "So what caused you to sign on to this?" And they'll either say, they'll give me one of three things. Thing one, the one thing they say that's outside your control. They'll say, "Because I heard Johnny Depp was in this role and I wanted to work with him," or something like that, right? They'll just name off an actor or a director, somebody they wanted to work with. And it's like, okay, that's one reason. Thing two, because it was a known for role. And then thing three, and this includes both of these. Thing three, because I just wanted to be that character, taking those actions and saying those lines. And I've had 20 actors say that exact line to me in front of audiences. I just wanted to be that character, taking those unique and special actions and saying those unique and special lines. And guess what? All three of these, you are the person who can make them happen. Now, let's go to one more thing. Producer bait. It fulfills their business needs. So when you're talking with a producer, and by the way, if you ever go in any pitch fest, you will see 95% of the writers will sit down and they'll just start telling their story. And they will talk and they will tell as much as they can about their story. And I've stood there watching producers. I've stood there watching how they respond. And the problem is that it doesn't fit any of their business needs. I had one writer who he had one project that I was like, that's the one to pitch. And he was like, no, I want to pitch this other one. So I said, okay, all right, then here's what you do. Because he was insistent. He was going to pitch that story that he's writing right that moment that he was in love with emotionally and the whole thing. I said, okay, then here's what you do. Give it your best shot. You've got 5 minutes with these producers. Give it 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Allow 30 seconds at the very end. And he said, for their questions? And I said, no. Allow 30 seconds at the end so that when they say no to this one, you can just simply say, is it okay if I pitch another one real fast? And then you give them genre, title, high concept. He pitched 11 producers that day. He got 7 script requests, all from the last 30 seconds. And he said, after doing that, he understood what I was saying. The producers are making their decisions based on business needs. All they actually needed to hear was genre, title, high concept. That was the vast majority of their business needs. Genre tells them, who else are they pitching this to? Are they pitching it to other producers? Like if you said horror, automatically, the moment you say horror, I think of Blumhouse. I think of about 6 horror producers I'd go to, and I think of Blumhouse because Blumhouse is one of the biggest places you pitch it. So the moment you say the genre, they immediately in their minds go, okay, I know I can pitch it to these places. Title, now it's about, will this sell to an audience? And high concept, is this something that I can get other people involved in? I can get streamers to say, yes, they'll look at the project. I can get audiences to take a look at it. We can sell it through trailers, whatever it is, right? Those are all business needs. And they're all done genre, title, high concept. Now, I always have also a couple of follow-up to that, which is if they ask me, okay, and tell me the story, I have a follow-up that's a 2-sentence response to that. I have a follow-up that's a 1-sentence response. If they say, what are you thinking for actors? I'll say, well, I'm thinking this might do well with Charlize Theron because blah, blah, blah. 1 sentence. Right? And it's like it all fulfills their business needs. That's important. And then that's the other thing. They see a path to be able to sell this movie to a large audience. And again, your genre, title, high concept, maybe 1 or 2 sentences after that get right to what will make it easy to sell. Often, they'll ask me, well, how would I sell this? And I might go up and tell them the transformational journey. And I've written it and rewritten it and thought of 7 different ways to say it and picked the one that was the most interesting. And that's all I say. 2 sentences, and they say yes. Biggest deal we ever made. Biggest deal we ever made. The entire pitch, start to finish, was 3 sentences. I said genre, title, high concept. I paused. The producer was like, she was the president of the company. It was a big TV company. I paused. This was for a TV series. And she said, wow. And then I gave her 2 more sentences that told her why it could be an entire series, how it could play out over that entire series. And at the end, she looked at her VP and she said, get me the president of ABC. I want to tell him about this. And then she looked back to me and she goes, I'm assuming you want to work with us. And I said, absolutely. And she goes, let me make this 1 phone call. I'm going to tell him exactly what you said. And we'll be back to you in about an hour. I was on the way home. My phone rang. She said yes. And that started that journey, right? It's like, only tell them the things that are the compelling bait, and you're a star. Now, to sell, again, let me just add one more thing here. You also then need to make a deal. So I'm going to tell you a bunch of things about how to make a deal here. Don't get worried. When you get to it, all of this will make sense. First, stay away from the obvious deal killers. Anytime somebody is demanding A-list money when they've just started out. And by the way, if you're A-list, then absolutely you demand A-list money. If you're B-list, you have your agent or manager ask for A-list money and then negotiate. But if you're somebody who's never been in there and you're asking for $1 million for a script, that's a deal killer for them because they don't know you, they've never worked with you, you don't have any credibility, all that kind of thing. Somebody asking for full control without their credits warranting it. Again, all of these things make sense at the very top, but they don't make sense anywhere below that. Asking to direct when you have no director credits. I don't know why, but I've seen lots and lots of people who have been told to do this. If you have no director credits and if it doesn't make sense for them money wise for you to direct. So, go get some director credits, shoot a couple of low budget indies, and then come back, and then it makes sense because you've got some credits, you've gone through the process, all of that. Key question: what's a sensible deal for both parties? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for something that makes sense and works for both parties. Uh, why I'm saying this is two reasons. One is, again, people a lot of times will go ask their friends, how much money should I get? And the people will tell them something they saw in the newspaper, which meant anytime you see something online in the news, if they're talking about, hey, this movie's coming out, and by the way, the writer got paid $2 million for it. A lot of times people think that's normal. It's not. A sensible deal in most cases, if you're inside the industry, is going to be WGA minimum plus some points. If you're outside the industry, never been in, then it's going to depend a lot on who the producer is, who the streamer is they're going to. Do they already have a deal with them? There's going to be a lot of things. So you need to make something sensible. Okay. For the producer, this is usually based on marketability. When they're saying yes to a deal to you, they're saying it because you've got a marketable project, the budget makes sense, they can get funding at that level, and then for the producer, they have some specific needs, what their urgency is, and what their production needs are. Now, let me tell you, this is the big one right here. So a producer came to me at one point and said, I need a writer who can work in horror. I said, okay, we've got lots of horror writers. And at that time, he had no deadlines. He had a script he wanted to write. He had some ideas. He chose the person that said they would agree to the least amount of money, who was the person that was the least experienced. So there was no urgency. He had zero urgency. Excuse me, I'm sorry. He calls me back a year later and he said, Hal, remember that horror script? And I said, yes. And he says, I got good news and bad news for you. And I was like, okay, what? He goes, the bad news is I fired the writer yesterday. I said, okay, what happened? And he goes, well, he says, I wanted some changes. He did a draft. I wanted some changes. He refused to make them. So, I'm not going to move forward with that script. I said, okay. So you fired the writer, and I knew who the writer was. So I called him immediately afterwards to condole him, give him my condolences and take care of him. But he said, the good news is I need another writer. And I was like, okay. And he says, and this time I know what I'm looking for. I said, okay, what are you looking for? He goes, I'm looking for someone who can write the script in 30 days. It's horror, you know that. 30 days. And I said, why? And this took us to his production needs. And he said, we're going into production in 32 days. He says, the previous writer, we had all those problems. I thought he was going to get it done. When he handed it back to me and told me he wasn't willing to make any changes, that was at the last moment deadline. So he says, I'm in a pickle. And I'm like, okay, all right, got it. What else do you need? So then he told me the three other things he needed from a writer. He needed somebody who could take notes and make changes instantly. He needed somebody who understood production needs and what was going to happen there. And I'm like, all right. And he said he needed somebody who could work with a director. So I was like, all right, that narrows it down quite a bit. I have 2 writers who can do all of that flawlessly. He goes, okay, bring the best one to the meeting. Let's meet tomorrow. So we did. Our writer, we brought her in. She had directed before. She knew what she was doing. She had written horror before. And we sat down. She had read the script overnight So she knew exactly what needed to be done. The urgency was there. He said yes to her immediately. She told him how much money he wanted. He said, "Oh my God, I don't think I can do that." And she said, "If you want me to do this in 30 days and have it completely done and give up my entire life for it, that's how much money I need." And he goes, "You've got a deal." There was the urgency. He had to have somebody right then. Because of that, he paid her 3 times what he paid the other writer. So when you find that, that's when you've got your chance to do something else. And in that case, it's sensible because it made sense in her world. She worked 12 to 14 hours every single day during that 30-day period. She turned in 7 different drafts of that script. She did an incredible job. And that movie got produced, and he came back later on and thanked me, and he said it was only because of her. That's why that movie got made. So, okay, if you're that person, everybody's going to want to work with you in the first place. Sensible deals are going to be higher. If you're in an urgency situation, you can ask for more money. All right. A couple of other things. For the writer, there's different criteria. And a lot of times people just think it's only about the money. My first criteria is always, will it move your career forward? If you've never been produced, the moment that you get optioned, you just moved your career forward. You just became somebody who could call up and say, "Hi, I'm an option screenwriter, and I was wondering if I could run a project by you." If you get produced, now you have even more credibility in that situation. So it moves your career forward. It could move your career forward just because you're getting a chance to work with a specific director or a specific producer. So if you're new, if you haven't made deals yet, this becomes 10 times more important than everything else. Be thinking about that. One other thing I'll tell you, we had a writer who had 4 movies produced, and one of them you can see on, I think it's Netflix. But he called me up one day and he says, "This producer's offering me this deal. Here are the terms." And I listened to him and I said, "Based on who the producer is, unless the director is somebody amazing, I wouldn't even consider it." It was a deal I would have said yes to with any new writer. I would have said, "Wow, this will move your career forward. It'll make things happen." But his problem was it didn't matter how much money he got paid. It wasn't going to move his career forward in any way. In fact, it might move it backwards. So anyway, he didn't do it. Okay. Then it's about money. Money. Are you going to get some now? There's hardly any money in options right now. So usually this is going to be $1, $100, something like that. But make sure you get paid on or before the first day of production, never after that. If they tell you that they're going to pay you after production, there's never any money after production. They spend every single penny. So on or before the first day of production. And then a back end means you get some kind of points that'll be, coming out of the producer's end. You might get 2%, 1%, 2%, maybe 3%, if you're new, of whatever the producer's profit is. If you can get that, get it, but don't depend on it. Because unless they've got something amazing happening in that situation, seldom is there really a back end. The other benefit here, and this is the other reason to make the deal, getting your movie or TV series on the air. Once it's on the air, now your reputation just went up 10 times inside this industry. Now you have a produced movie and you can say you can see it on Netflix or whatever. That's enough for you to get meetings with 90% of the people in this industry. The project increases your credibility. If you've never been optioned, now you're an option writer. If you've never been produced, now you're a produced writer. If you've never had something on a streamer, now you're a writer who has projects on streamers. And then working with producers to get experience. Incredibly important. I can teach you all about how to do this. I can give you every single don't do this, all those. But once you do it, everything you've learned from me or anybody else out there will all now have 10 times the value because you've been through it with a producer, even if it's a bad experience. So, so for those who have been through a bad experience with producers, stop classifying it as a trauma. I hear people want to tell their victim stories all the time. Listen, if a producer yelled at you, I got it. The producer really was acting like a child. They shouldn't have. There's all kinds of things that happen along the way. If you just do the thing, do the job, get it done, get to the end, the movie gets made, you know what? Afterwards, nobody knows whatever else happened there. You want to then use whatever experience you had to become a better writer and to prepare for what's coming up next and all of that kind of thing. And then, of course, getting a written by credit, which now also says you're not just somebody who was on the project, you're the writer. And breaking in. So these are the things I'd be considering. Sometimes people will say, well, if I don't get a certain amount of money, I'm not doing it. If they've never had any kind of career whatsoever, everything else is more important than the money. Just be thinking that. And then if you get money, spectacular. Once you get to your second or third, then it starts to become more and more and more about the money and more and more about it being a high enough level for you to be able to survive, take care of your bills, create success, and ultimately it becomes something that makes you wealthy. Right? We know lots of writers who have made it to A-list, even if it was just for a minute, and got that kind of money, and it changed their lives. So keys to success. Let me give you a few here. Anytime someone says it's not possible to break in, it just means they don't have the strategies. And you know what, there are a lot of people out there who say a lot of weird things. Just don't listen to all the naysayers, really. The more you know what causes deals to happen, the more successful you'll be. If we went through this whole thing today and you went, yeah, everything there makes total sense, and then you operate out of it, you have a so much better chance of success in this industry. If you looked at some of the things I said and you went, I don't agree with that, I want 10 times that money or whatever, and you're brand new, you know, everything that you disagreed with probably was something that you could learn and become amazing because of it. I'm only here to help writers succeed. That's it. We want as many people as possible to make deals. So to increase your chance of success, learn the best strategies for designing pitching, for your designing your pitches, for interacting with producers, for setting yourself up for success. This is incredibly important. Learn all you can. Now, let me now show you something that I think you're going to love. A lot of times people have problems writing query letters or leave behinds or those kinds of things. We have a model for doing that that came straight from producers. I had this moment at one point where I brought 20 writers into a room. We were interviewing the producers. The writers then gave me their query letters beforehand. We put them in an envelope, and with each producer, I would just say, thank you so much for coming in. By the way, I have one pages from each of the writers. Would it be okay if I just gave you that? And if you like anything, you can give them a call. And all the producers said yes. But this one guy, he says to me, I'll only look at them if I do it in front of the room. And I said, okay. And he says, and I'm going to be harsh. So I looked at the writers and I said, are you guys okay with that? And they said yes. So I handed him the envelope. So he opens it up and he pulls them out and he pulled up a trash can and he'd look at one and he'd throw it in the trash can. And then he'd look at the next one, he'd throw it in the trash can. And after he did that with about five, I said, okay, hang on just a second. He goes, no, I'm going to keep going. I said, no, I just want to ask what's your criteria? How are you making that decision? Because there's no way you read those. The most you could have gotten was one or two sentences. He says, I'm just looking for a hook, man. He says, if I don't see a hook, it goes in the trash. And I was like, wow, okay. So he went through and at the end he picked out one. And he goes, first, this one I like. I like it for a whole bunch of reasons, but immediately I read the opening sentence and he looks down at the bottom and he goes, and Shauna is a great writer. He goes, who's Shauna in this room? And it was this, I think she was like 19 years old. She had only written one script, but she had done everything I said to do on the query letter. And she was the only one who put a one sentence hook at the top. And he said, I read that hook and I knew she's a great writer. And he goes, now, having said that, I might look at her script and say something completely different. But he said, this was the best of all the query letters, and it wasn't yet what I want. And I was like, what do you want? So I interviewed him. And then what I started doing was every time a producer would come in, I'd lay out 6 different query letters, all the different forms that you're being told out there to write. I laid out 6 query letters and I'd say, which of these goes in the trash and which of them do you read? Without reading anything, just glance at them and tell me. And they would put 5 out of the 6 in the trash. And what we did was the one that stayed, then I asked them a million questions about it until we got to where if they saw one of our query letters, they just said yes. Now, I'm telling you that because now I'm going to show you how to create one real fast, the easiest possible way. And I'm going to take you over to AI to do this. Just stay with me just for a minute because this is actually pretty cool. And just to be clear, so everybody knows, we don't let writers write scripts on AI or any of that kind of thing, but this is about creating a marketing document. So we have a very specific way that we're doing this. And let me just show you, I'm going to create a query letter here for a project. And what I did was I put in a summary of the query letter, but we've got an incredible prompt. So I just want you to see this. This is the query letter. Notice first, it would take up about a half of a page. So it's not a full page, but I want you to see it has an opening hook, and you don't leave these words in. You don't leave the words opening hook in there. It has an opening hook, a middle hook, and a final hook. This is what producers have told us they want to see. And I'll tell you how it works just so you can see. Here's the opening hook. What if humanity's first contact was already made and Earth agreed to forget? So that's the version it put. That's not bad, right? We're talking about aliens. We're saying we've already made contact with them and Earth has agreed to forget for some reason. So at least it's somewhat intriguing, right? Also, it's on a single sentence. They can read it in a glance. It doesn't go over to 2 lines or that kind of thing. Notice all 3 of these hooks, single sentence. You can get it in a glance, and it, again, doesn't go over to a second line. The astronauts didn't survive the void, but they were transformed by it. Now, again, it's intriguing. What does that mean? Can humanity stop a cosmic awakening when the key to it is human? Not sure exactly what that means. We'll find out. But the way we do this is the opening hook sucks the producer in, and then they read what the first act is about. And we're very specific about what goes in there. Its job is to cause the producer to see a first act and to have them go, okay, this first act ends in an incredibly interesting way. Then we go to the middle hook, which then takes us into the big conflict for the rest of the movie. Now, we don't have to tell them all the acts. if they see an opening act and they know what the big conflict is for the rest of the movie, they can make a decision, right? So this is written in a way that just makes it incredibly easy for a producer to say yes. Now, let me show you something else we did here that makes it even better. These hooks are the most important things, by the way. They're also the most difficult for writers to create. I've worked with hundreds of writers on this where we've walked through and worked with their query letter. This was the part, creating the hooks was the part that they had the most trouble with. They wanted to tell instead of sell. They wanted to, they wanted to put as much detail in there. And a lot of times it didn't work. And a lot of times they just had no idea how to create hooks. So what we did with that was this. I asked it, and we designed it so that it would do this. It gives us 5 other possible opening hooks. Let's look at this one. The shuttle came back, but what returned wasn't entirely human. I actually like that one. That's a good opening hook. It's short, it's easy to read. You get it immediately, and then that has you have to look down below to find out what returned. So that one's pretty cool. But it's got 4 others that you can choose from. So you end up picking the best opening line that will hook the producer, especially when they're in high-speed mode, where they're only going to give it a glance. Then we got our middle hooks. Here are some other middle hooks. If you don't like the one above, here's 5 other possible ones, and here's 5 possible final hooks. So what this is going to do is you pick the very best of each one, and you go back, and now what you have is the sentences that are the easiest to read are incredibly intriguing and interesting. And because of that, that means they're going to read every bit of it. And if they read every bit of your story when it's done this way, you've got a really good chance that you're going to get a script request out of that. Now, why I'm telling you that is because of a couple of things. Just a second here. We have this designed into our class that is called Getting Scripts to Power Players. This is the most up-to-date class there is on how to get producers to say yes to your projects. It's something that we designed entirely from interviewing producers. I've interviewed over 600 producers, and having to do with marketing and what gets them to say yes. I've probably talked with at least 300 of them about that. It's the most important thing, in my opinion. If you're trying to sell a script, getting them to say yes is incredibly important. So we designed this program that takes you through and makes sure you understand exactly how they think. And the prompt that you just saw, that's one of 4 prompts. There are 4 different kinds of pitches that you're going to learn in this class. You will get 4 prompts, one for each one of those kinds of pitches. I'll tell you about those in just a moment. But every one of them, you saw how long it takes there. It took about 10 seconds for it to create an incredible query letter that increases your chance of getting a yes by about 70, 80%. So it's worth it. So here's what this class is about. First thing, how to get 50 script requests. We were doing a master class for a while where we would take writers to market for 30 days. We did 18 of those master classes, and in every single one of them, we had at least one person get 50 script requests. There were some of them we had 5 and 8 people who got 50 script requests. And it was because they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew how to think like a producer. So I went back and I interviewed all those people that got 50 script requests, and I found out exactly what they did. So lesson 1 is going to tell you a complete model for how to get 50 script requests. You won't see this information anyplace else because it came from our writers who did that. By the way, I'll tell you, if you get 50 script requests, you almost always end up with a deal with a producer and possibly a manager or an agent out of it. So it's worth it. Lesson 2, how do managers and what do managers and producers need? And these two need different things. If you've never pitched to either one of them, this will change your life because you'll stop telling them things they don't care about. You'll only hand them exactly what they need to say yes to you. And they will see you as a pro because of that. But the other thing is let's say you've only pitched to producers. When you go to pitch to managers and agents, those are different animals and they have different needs. Once you understand that, while you'll tell your same story to both of them, you will pitch yourself in a very different way that will be incredibly easy once you've gone through lesson 2. That's my job, is to make it easy for people to succeed. Then the 10 components of marketability. This is how the industry decides something is marketable. I have had so many writers, I'll say, this script is marketable, this one isn't. And they'll go, how do you know that? And it's like, this is how I know, because I went and interviewed about 200 producers and asked them exactly what constitutes marketability. So here we'll give you the 10 things that they said, that all of them said pretty much. And that means anytime you pitch, if the producer is nodding off or falling asleep, you just go right to one of these and they'll sit up and go, oh, this can sell. Now, let's go on. The 10 most interesting things. This is you looking at your script and saying, what are the things in it that will be incredibly interesting to audiences and producers? And if you have those, and that's all you're talking from 10 components of marketability and the 10 most interesting things, everything you say will sell. If you don't have either one of these, it doesn't matter how much you say, really. Then how to use hooks to create pitches. You saw we have an AI version of how to create hooks, and it's because I told the AI exactly what I'm going to tell you here. And it created some pretty good hooks. All the ones that I highlighted there, and I was only looking at the top ones, they were all really interesting, right? This is an art. And once you become great at creating hooks, producers in this industry are going to see you as somebody who can sell, and managers in this industry are going to say, okay, that person is going to have a career that's just going to go straight up. This is 99.5% of writers don't know how to create hooks on demand. Every once in a while they fluke on one, but they don't know what they're doing on that. And this comes from, again, talking with managers about how they pitch, talking with agents about how they pitch. That's what they were looking for. Then it's about the high concept and the elevator pitches. And this is the first of our 4 main pitches that if you're going into the industry, let's say you have a project you're ready to pitch right now, when you are going in those doors, you need to have all 4 of these. Because if you run into somebody in an elevator pitch, this might be at Starbucks, you run into a producer and they say, hey, what are you working on? You can say one sentence and they'll follow you out of the Starbucks and want to talk with you about it. If you have this. If you don't have it and you start trying to tell them the story, they're going to be leaving the Starbucks trying to get away from you. So these 2 are incredibly important. This is what the industry needs to sell. They need high concepts. This is what you need if you just happen to have one of those lucky moments. Then it's about the advanced query letters. You just saw the version that we use. Again, that came straight from producers. And again, on all of these, I'm going to give you AI prompts so you can create them in seconds. And again, when people tell you a query letter doesn't work, if you look at the query letter, you won't see any of those hooks. And by the way, you'll also, if you even start to read it, you'll go, that's why that query letter didn't work. Up here, how to be a star at Pitch Fest. And this also is how to be a star at Zoom pitches. If you're going to do a 5-minute Zoom pitch, you need this model right here. We also have an AI prompt that will create that for you. So at least it'll create a version and then you can work with it. But we've had people who have made deals just based on using that AI prompt. And then phone pitches without pain. Now, this we are stars at. This is how Cheryl and I got almost all of our projects into major production companies, studios, and TV networks. When we were doing that, there weren't streamers around. We produced for about 5 years, 15 years ago. But phone pitches was what we used, and we used it constantly. And it got us into every door with the exception of one. There was one company that wouldn't take our calls. Only one, all the rest. We got into every major production company on the lots of studios. We got into every actor's company. And we got into all the studios. And it was by using phone pitches, and they were painless. Our phone pitches are about 30 to 45 seconds total. And they are designed for a producer to say yes. In the beginning, we were getting about 20% of them were saying yes. By the end, 80% of them were saying yes and requesting the script. So this makes a huge difference. And again, we've got an AI prompt to create it. So you can create it your own way, and then you can go try the AI prompt, see which one you like the best. Then how to target your market. How do you make sure you're going in the right places? How to network from anywhere in the world. We have people in Australia that have gotten into some of the biggest agencies and are represented there. We have people from South Africa. We have people from the UK, from Canada. We have people who, using this networking model, were able to get in the doors they wanted and got representation. So, and then how to put these marketing campaigns into action. So this class, it's a 30-day class. It starts on April 28th. That gives you 1 month to be able to work with your script and do whatever you can. You're on a deadline now. A month from now, you're going to start this class. When you start this class, your entire focus is just marketing. It's like, how do I create these pitches? How do I learn and master this? Once you're done with the class and you've created all of your pitches, then go back to your script, rewrite it any way you want. When you're ready to start marketing, you've already got the 4 pitches. You already know what you're doing. You know how managers and producers think. You know exactly what to do. And let me give you a special on this. Again, the class begins 1 month from now, April 28th. The price is $199, which is an incredible price for this program. It took us years to be able to design all of this. The special price right now, and this is for the first 10 people, you can get in for $129. So all you got to do to get in right now, write this link down, bit.ly, bit.ly/power players, there's an S there, class. So no spaces, no capitals, no dashes, none of that. Just write it down, bit.ly, bit.ly/power players with an S class. Put that in your browser where you normally put a web address, click return, come join us. Starting April 28th, every single day, you will learn the things that 98% of the writers coming in this industry don't know. And every day you will make your project more marketable, more pitchable, and create a better chance that it can sell. Also, the one other thing that this will do for you is from this point on, when you create your next project, you'll create a pitch early on so that by the end of the first draft, maybe you'll create your pitch, and that will influence how you rewrite from that point. Draft two, draft three, draft four will come from that pitch. So you'll end up with a script that really does an amazing job of delivering on the pitch from the very beginning. That gives you a better chance of selling, that gives you a better chance of getting in the door, and it gives you a better chance of succeeding as a writer. So if you want to do that, come join us. Right now for $129, which is, 70, it saves you $70. This will help you make all the best decisions so you have such a much better chance of having everything else you do pay off. It is so worth it. So see you there. It's great hanging out with you. I hope you got a lot out of today, and I promise you this class will change your life. With that, this is Hal Krosman wishing you the best. I'll see you in class. Bye-bye, everyone.